What's going on YouTube? It's TH back again with another video, and today we are going to grade and tier rank week 1 of free agency for each and every NFL franchise. Been waiting to do something like this, grade some free agent signings, grade some trades as well. This was an easy way to kind of lump both of those categories into one video, and also want to give it a full week, and we'll see maybe some people change their mind, as well as what other signings maybe change the complexion of a team's offseason. So we're going to go ahead and grade and tier rank all 32 teams. Be sure to leave your grades down below. Who's your favorite squad? Have you liked free agency? Did you like the trade your favorite team made? And also, who do you think's had the best offseason so far? Love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Like if you all enjoy, subscribe if you're new and wanting more football content in your life. So, we start with the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, you released Marcus Golden and chosen Anderson. I guess he was not chosen. Lame pun anyways, but Kelvin Beachum I actually think was a pretty solid signing, getting him back, and he's a capable starter. I'm hoping that they can still work Josh Jones in as that starting left tackle. I don't know what you would do then with DJ Humphries, but there are a lot of tackle needy teams out there. Maybe you're turning him into a day 3 pick or something like that. So get cheaper at the position. I would recommend with Josh Jones, but I'm glad they brought back Beachum because he's stable, he's solid, he's consistent. You know what you get with him, and didn't make that much money. Kaiser White, they need another inside linebacker, but White's just kind of been a disappointment just about everywhere he's gone. Solid contract for Matt Prater, so nothing to really comment on there. I do like the Will Hernandez, re-signing, and I think 4.5 a year, pretty solid price point. I think last year was one of the better years of his career, and he's still in his mid-20s. I was excited about when the Cardinals signed him last offseason because it felt like getting away from New York and some of the drama that was kind of surrounding him and previous offensive line coaches. Felt like an opportunity where he would get better once he got to a different location. So now with all that done, let's go ahead and flip over to our tier ranker here. Cardinals, I'll put him in the mid. Look, this is a retool. This is a team going through a whole lot right now, and really the most impactful things they could have done this offseason was get the head coach hire right and get the GM hire right. And I think we have to wait and see on how those play out. So I think for the moves themselves, mid, they're fine. But it'll probably be towards the lower portion of the mid category, if you ask me. All right, let's flip back and let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. I like bringing back Lorenzo Carter. I like the trade for Jonnu Smith, giving up a day 3 pick. Hefty contract, but nevertheless, he fits with Arthur Smith in that offense, and I'd love to see Kyle Pitts play more wide receiver, and hopefully that leads to more targets and more production. Chris Lindstrom, and then we'll kind of lump in Caleb McGarry in there. McGarry, I think they did a great job with handling that negotiation process, and because of that, they got him at a good deal. They got him at a pretty affordable AAV, and then with Lindstrom, it's like, it's tough because you're going to have to pay that guy. He's still young, and he's one of your own. You drafted him, right? So you'd want to be able to pay him up, and we're Caleb McGarry, I think, is definitely aided by a run-heavy offense. So, therefore, once Chicago signed Mike McGlinchey, it was like, okay, there's really only one other fit for McGarry, and it's in Atlanta. While Lindstrom, there's plenty of teams who would sign a guard, and there's plenty of teams who would pay him the money that he's now getting. So, it's a hefty, price tag, but still think it's a solid player to keep, and you always want to reward the guys that you draft, reward the front office in a lot of ways. David Onyemata, one of the smaller D tackles, but has been a good run stopper throughout his career, so it'd be interesting to see a defensive line with him and Grady Jarrett out there. But if you get Onyemata at his peak and being a high-level run defender, I think it makes Grady Jarrett's life that much easier, allows him to focus on being a pass rusher, so don't hate it whatsoever. Private opinion, punter, whatever. Jesse Bates is really the big headline here. I don't think it's an unreasonable price tag there. $16 million a year. It's a lot for a safety, but we've also seen some other safeties command about the same market, if not more. And that type of over-the-top free safety was huge in New Orleans, and their DC, or now Atlanta's new DC, comes from that background. And I think Jesse Bates could totally be a Marcus Williams type. So like that signing a ton, and figure out if they can find a corner in this year's draft, whether it's Gonzalez making it to them at 8, or it's Joey Porter Jr. or Devon Witherspoon, whoever that guy is for them. You add them with AJ Terrell and the Jesse Bates signing, and all of a sudden that secondary gets really, really scary. And then Caden Ellis and Taylor Heineke, Heineke, whatever, it's fine. But really the headline is, keeping that right side of the offensive line intact, and then the splash signing is Jesse Bates. So, yeah, all in all, I think a solid offseason for the Falcons. So I think we'll put them in the solid tier. I like a lot of what they've done, and really this is going to be a team that it's going to come down to the quarterback position, right? So I think they've done a good job putting a solid supporting cast around Desmond Ridder, because it seems like he's going to be the guy, barring they make a move in the draft. Ravens. So yeah, you have the Lamar Jackson situation. As of right now, I am thinking he's going to be the starter, but Man, we'll see. I don't know. Every day that goes by makes me feel less and less sure about that, but I think they'd be crazy for letting them walk, even if they do, fetch 2 first-rounders. But I don't know. They're also letting other teams negotiate for him, so I don't really mind that either. Let other people do the legwork, and then you can just match that contract offer. So don't hate it. They released Calais Campbell. I know they talked about maybe bringing him back. He's been a big part of that defense, so wouldn't hate that whatsoever. Trayvon Mullen, former corner. Now they got him listed at safety, so some flexibility there, and it's just the opportunity to buy low on a guy who was a top 50 pick, not too long ago. So don't hate that investment whatsoever. Justice Hill, longtime running back, it feels like, for Baltimore, and then Geno Stone. So they haven't really done a whole lot, and really this is going to come down to the Lamar Jackson situation. So for the Ravens right now, I'll put them in the mid, just ahead of the Falcons, or excuse me, just ahead of the Ravens. Got our birds up top here, getting me mixed up. But I'll go with the Ravens just ahead of the Cardinals. But yeah, this will come down to Lamar Jackson. If they lose Lamar, then I'm going to have a hard time keeping them where they are. Anyways, let's move on to the Bills now. Add some additional depth. They re-sign their punter, get Matt Milano back on it. I think that was an extension more so than a re-sign, but nevertheless, you also bring in Connor McGovern, some additional interior offensive line reinforcements, which they desperately needed. I go back to that playoff game against the Bengals, and so much hoopla was made about Cincy's O-line, but Buffalo's was the weakest unit in that game. So like them bringing in McGovern, guard center flexibility too is certainly nice. Deontay Hardy, I'm interested by that signing. 4.75 a year is not a small chunk of change, but a really dynamic special teams guy, and then also great over-the-top speed. And when you have a guy with a howitzer like Josh Allen, just let him chunk it deep, put it in a location, and let Hardy fall underneath it. I think there's a lot of big play capabilities in the mix there, and they also did release Isaiah McKenzie, so I figured Deontay Hardy and Khalil Shakir to be those, guys that they use in that, gadget slash push the ball down the field. They did a lot of that with Shakir last year. I hope they use him more underneath as an extra valve to try to win in areas, 10 yards and shorter. I felt like so much of the Bills' offense last year was trying to push the ball down the field, and, Allen's got the arm strength for it, but you also need to mix in those underneath stuff, so that way you have those deep throws, and you have the intermediate threat that is Stephon Diggs. So I'd like to see Shakir used more there, and I also think Deontay Hardy can play a part of that, as well as, of course, over-the-top speed to spare. And then bringing back Jordan Poyer, that's definitely, that's a huge part of their identity. And I also like them bringing back Dane Jackson. So keeping pieces that were already, solid members of that secondary, and, for Poyer's sake, one of the biggest identifying factors for the Bills over the last 10 years. So him and Micah Hyde, that 1-2 punch in the secondary, has been a huge thing that comes to mind when I think about the Buffalo Bills. So good to see those guys come back. Now, granted, I don't know how long that tandem stays in place, but I think it's been a solid offseason so far for the Bills. Not a whole lot of, super splashy moves, so we'll put them just behind the Falcons, but like a lot of what they've done, keeping their own, restructuring Milano, and just kind of maintaining that status quo. This is a team that should be in the Super Bowl mix, so might as well keep that foundation in place. Then we get to the Panthers. Big moves here, signing Von Bell, really excited about that. And then I would assume Jeremy Chinn's going to keep playing that nickel corner strong safety role. Bell kind of is this strong safety with some free safety flexibility, so really, I'd love to see them get that over-the-top ball hawk, and maybe it's getting Xavier Woods back. Actually, I think he's signed elsewhere, but nevertheless, maybe it's drafting a guy in the 3rd round or something like that. So add one more over-the-top playmaking ball hawk type of safety, and I think him plus Jeremy Chinn and Von Bell, that safety rotation becomes really, really lethal. But Von Bell's a really good player. I also love them re-signing Bradley Bozeman. Him at $6 million a year, I think is a great price tag. They move on from Pat Elflein. That was always a signing that was a little head scratching to me. Andy Dalton, love that for a veteran leadership type of guy, and work with whoever that rookie quarterback that they're going to draft at 1 is going to end up being. And then you have Dalton, and you have Josh McCown as the QB's coach. You got Frank Reich there, and Jim Caldwell as well. This is a very QB-friendly situation for whoever that rookie is to step into. Hayden Hurst, 7+ a year. I don't know if that's necessarily the fairest price tag for Hayden Hurst. I just can't really think of how big of an impact he's had in an offense in a while, but Frank Reich loves his tight ends, and maybe this is the year for Hayden Hurst, and if he has that breakout, then this is going to look like a steal. Miles Sanders is kind of the head scratcher here. I like Miles Sanders. He's solid. He's just like a B-level running back to me. He does a lot of things well, but really isn't too flashy. He's coming off a good year for sure, but I think a lot of those running backs in Philly looked good. I think it's the offense. I think it's the offensive line. I think it's having a running quarterback in Jalen Hurts, which makes it that much more challenging for a defense to keep track of. So paying him $6.75 a year for 4 years, I'd just rather have drafted a guy in the third round, if I'm honest, have them be the running mate with Chuba Hubbard, and then you get 4 years of control, someone who's younger, has less hits, and they're cheaper. So that would have been the route I take, but nonetheless, I mean, the Von Bell signing, the Bradley Bozeman move, I love. Hurst has some upside to it, and then Dalton, yeah, there's a lot to like here. I think this is another one of those solid off seasons here. And we'll sandwich them right between the Falcons and the Bills. This don't think this, exactly like I definitely think the Falcons have had a better offseason. I definitely think the Panthers have had a better offseason for the Bills. And honestly, there's still a whole lot more to be figured out. So still an exciting, exciting time to be an NFL fan because there's still a whole lot that we don't know about just yet. Anyways, let's move on to talk about the Chicago Bears. This is obviously a team that's been very, very active. Of course, the DJ Moore trade as a part of the move from 1 down to 9. You get a ton of assets in there draft-wise, but getting DJ Moore helps you figure out what Justin Fields is right here, right now, and there's not going to be a player acquired in the first round better than DJ Moore, at least not right away. So, yeah, love that trade there for Chicago. Helps them win now, but also gives them a ton to work with in the future. TJ Edwards as well as Jermaine Edmonds, like both those signings, and they're drastically different players. That's what makes it so interesting to me. You look at Edwards, and it's like this unathletic but very productive, very solid linebacker who has overcome the athletic shortcomings, and then Jermaine Edmonds, this guy was drafted at 19, if not 19, he was drafted at 20. It's just now hitting 25. Uber athletic, and it's coming off his best year. But before that, the play wasn't all that great. But you saw moments and you saw flashes, and there were some games where it's like, that's what Edmonds could be. So drastically different linebackers. So I kind of like the idea of them paired up in the middle of the field. It'd be really interesting, like when you go nickel and those are your two linebackers on the field, who has what assignment. I'm really interested to see that. Nate Davis, I think a really solid addition there on the interior offensive line. Pair that up with Andrew Billings, solid swing. Andrew Billings, solid nose tackle there. And if you can't get a guy in the draft, I think he's okay as a starter at $3.5 million. Sticking on the defensive line, DeMarcus Walker. I think in that 4-3, he'll be one of those D tackles, and maybe he could be that 3 tech that Eberflus is looking for. I kind of view this as just in case we don't get obviously, if we don't get Jalen Carter, if we don't get Adetomiwa Adeboah, we don't get a Kalijah Cansey, one of these high-level guys in this year's draft where they could be an absolute force in that 3-tech spot. If you miss out on all those guys, DeMarcus Walker is solid, stable, and I love when teams address all their needs in free agency, and they do it without breaking the bank, and I think Walker's contract is certainly reasonable, and that way you can go in the NFL draft with a very sober view of the board. Do I wish they did a little bit more on the offensive line? Yeah, sure. Nate Davis is a good start, but maybe they could still use another tackle, and it looks like they don't have the Mike McGlinchey. Mike McGlinchey went to the Broncos. I totally misspoke earlier. But nonetheless, so they could use another tackle here. But otherwise, solid offseason. I like Deonta Foreman, too, bringing him in the mix with Khalil Herbert. I've been saying for a while now, I think Khalil Herbert's going to be a breakout guy this year. So if you are in a dynasty league, definitely go try to make that move. But getting back to the offensive line, it does feel like if they're going to stick and pick at 9, Paris Johnson Jr., whoever that top tackle in their books is, that ends up being the guy that they take. So don't hate that whatsoever, and apologies again for the Mike McGlinchey miscue there. Hold on, we got to grade the Chicago Bears here. So let's go back over to our tier. I think the trade alone, I think you kind of have to put this in elite. They shelled a lot of money for Edmonds, sure. If they're not an elite, they're at the top end of solid, but I'll go elite because they maximize the value at number 1, both with the capability of winning now, but also later. They're addressing a lot of holes that they have outside of offensive tackle right now, so that way they're pretty well set up when it comes to the draft to be able to take best player available, with the exception maybe at 9 taking an offensive tackle. So I like a lot of what they have done so far. All right, now let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. It's been relatively quiet. Obviously, you lose Von Bell, you lose Jesse Bates. That's tough. Michael Thomas, I don't know if that's really anything to write home about. But then the next 3 moves are all pretty impactful. One, that Jermaine Pratt contract is an absolute steal. They got a great value for a very solid linebacker, like better than Edwards, maybe not as good upside-wise as Edmonds, but I would argue over the course of their careers, Pratt's been the better player right now. Obviously, again, Edmonds with his athletic capabilities comes with a ton of upside, and he's in his mid-20s. So, but from what we know and have seen so far, Pratt's been the better player. They got him for $7 million a year, so I love that signing. And then Orlando Brown Jr. This is the big move that the Bengals made here. Nick Scott's also a solid signing, some additional safety depth, and at least allows you to have one of those 2 safeties you lost replaced. And Scott's been a good player throughout his career, but back to Orlando Brown Jr. Yeah, I mean, ideally this is and I know from my understanding of it, he wants to play left tackle, so he should be an upgrade over Jonah Williams. He's also a really good run blocker, so I'd be really curious to see what this type of signing does for that run game and how much more efficient Joe Mixon or whoever is in the backfield ends up becoming because of this. But also, what do you do with Jonah Williams? Is he moving inside to guard? He's on the 5th-year option, so could you just deal with 1 year of paying a guard $13 million? I don't think that's out of the realm of feasibility. Or you flip him over to right tackle and have a battle between him and Collins, who has injury questions but also production questions, considering he wasn't all that great last year and wasn't the guy that the Bengals thought they were getting when they signed him to $10 million a year. So Orlando Brown Jr. I don't think he's as great as a lot of people want to hype him up to be, but he is a very good tackle, and he's certainly an upgrade over Jonah Williams. So from that standpoint, getting an upgrade is paramount. Losing those safeties is tough, though. You get Nick Scott. And I love the Jermaine Pratt re-signing. I'm going to put him in solid right next to the Bills. I think they've had a good offseason. I don't want to take anything away from them, but it's just going to be really, really challenging trying to replace Jesse Bates and Von Bell, who were just huge, and Luan Rumo's defense. Anyways, let's move on to the Browns now. Ethan Pochik, I think that's a really good re-signing. Great fit for that blocking scheme. $6 million a year, solid price. Ogbonnaya Okoronkwo, a lot of upside. He started to figure it out towards the back half of last year. Someone who hasn't really gotten a whole lot of snaps, so hopefully with a bigger sample size, the Browns maybe could be the spot that sees him break out. They got him at a pretty, expensive, contract, a little less than $8 a year for a guy that we're hoping breaks out, right? Like, we're anticipating he could do that. But if he doesn't take that step forward, this is going to be a very, very likely cut candidate in a year or two's time. So, Dalvin Tomlinson, this is the big signing here. And, how many people have been saying for a while now, the Browns need this two-gapping, run-stomping nose tackle. And they finally signed a guy like that. Now, I know there was a lot of excitement when Tomlinson went to Minnesota, because the Vikings kind of needed something like that as well to replace some of the pieces that they had lost. And ultimately, he was okay, and he had a little bit of pass rush production into the mix as well. But I don't really think that he lived up to the hype that a lot of Vikings had for Tomlinson. So hopefully it's a different story here for the Browns. They run that 4-3, so plug him right there in the middle, and any pass rush production you get is a plus, but ideally this is just someone who's going to help you become a much, much better run defense squad. Juan Thornhill, like that signing a ton. If you move on from John Johnson, this feels like a guy who can do a lot of different things, just like you could do with John Johnson III, but he's younger, and you're getting him at a cheaper price point. So yeah, love the signing a ton. And Thornhill's battled some injuries, and the way the Chiefs rotate their safeties, he wasn't always on the field. Didn't feel like a guy that really hit his full potential. Maybe the Browns are the spot to be able to have him hit that. Tristan Hill, this is just a little flyer. Jordan Atkins, same thing. Maurice Hurst is actually, between the two D tackle signings here of Hill and Hurst, I really like the Tomlinson signing because it's exactly what they need. But Hurst was, obviously had the, heart condition around the combine, so his draft stock was drastically impacted. But he was a guy pre that injury was pretty high on a lot of different boards, both as a defensive tackle, but just overall. So Tristan Hill, I don't think he's all that good, but Hurst comes with a little bit of an unknown quantity, which really is enticing. So Browns, man, I feel like I got to look at this offseason one more time. I like Tomlinson, I like Thornhill. A lot of this is good. I'm going to put him at the top of mid right now. That or the back of solid. I'm going back. Let's put them in solid. I might move them later on, but I'd love to see them add another wide receiver as well, just because I do think that is something that they're still looking for, and maybe that comes in the NFL draft. I'll do another one of these videos that's like off-season grades as well, so obviously not the first and only time that we're going to end up doing this. Dallas Cowboys. Okay, so you franchise tag Tony Pollard, you release Zeke Elliott. I think both moves make a ton of sense. It was about time that you could move on from Zeke. This was the first year you could really do it. Love the Donovan Wilson re-signing, as well as Leighton Vander Esch. Vander Esch is a great price tag. Yes, he comes with injury concerns, but for 5.5 a year, it's worth taking a shot. And Wilson's been a really, really good player for them. They don't have it in just yet, but they did make the trade this morning for Brandon Cooks at the time of me recording this. So trading 2 day 3 picks for Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks, 2 guys that will help you win immediately. Gilmore to be that other outside corner. You moved Ron Bland, who I'm still excited about, but I still think this team needed to add a corner. It almost played out perfectly. Get a veteran, because then it's easier to justify Bland moving inside, versus drafting a guy who's younger, and then it's like, Bland, now we're going to move you inside, despite you showing a little bit of promise last year. I think he was good in the slot, too, when we got to see him there. So, love that Gilmore addition. Him and Trevon Diggs, on paper, one of the best quarterback duos in football. And then Brandon Cooks, a guy who can play on the outside, brings that over the top speed. They liked and wanted Cooks at the trade deadline, so they finally make the trade happen. And again, it only costs a day 3 pick. Both those guys come with, a hefty price tag, but you're looking to win right now, and you're looking to maximize the talent on your roster. And for, Brandon Cook's sake, you're trying to keep a great ecosystem around Dak Prescott. I think that's paramount. And then, final couple moves here. Cooper Rush back as a backup, which solid. I mean, I can't go wrong there. Dak has missed time, so having a guy who can know the offense and you feel comfortable playing, as for a multiple, game stint as a starter, you really can't put a price tag on that. But, 2 years, $6 million is a really, really solid price tag, honestly. And then CJ Goodwin, man. So I like a lot of what the Cowboys have done. They've been really aggressive, and I really appreciate that given, where they are right now as a franchise. So I'm going to put them, elite is tough, I'm gonna put him in solid, just ahead of the Falcons, maybe. But I do like a lot of what the Falcons did too. So everyone's pretty much had a pretty good offseason. I know a lot of this is coming into context. Like maybe you could put the Cardinals down here and below average, but they're in a different timeline than what the Cowboys are on right now when it comes to trying to be a winning team. So I'm sure we'll start getting some negative grades in here pretty soon. But nonetheless, let's move on and talk about the Denver Broncos. Another team that's been very active. So they released Graham Glass now. You also have Dalton Reisner still as a free agent. Releasing Ronald Darby made a lot of sense. Good cut casualty there. And then a lot of work in the offensive line. Mike McGlinchey, I misspoke earlier again. Mike McGlinchey over at right tackle. Ben Power, so a lot of investments there. Bring back Alex Singleton. Don't hate that move whatsoever. Zach Allen as a Draymond Jones replacement. You were going to pay one of those two guys this price point. Honestly, I kind of wish you just had Draymond Jones. I know he's good there, and I know he's a pass rusher. Zach Allen, feels like a poor man's J.J. Watt, and couldn't beat out J.J. Watt in his last season in regards to production and being the best player on that D-line. So I still like Zach Allen a ton. Liked him a lot coming out of Boston College because he felt like a poor man's J.J. Watt. But still, I don't know about that price tag. I might be a little rich for my blood. Samaje Perine, really like that signing a ton. And then you re-sign your punter. So yeah, Jarrett Stidham, solid backup as well. So yeah, all things considered, I think they're addressing a lot of different areas where they needed to improve, no doubt about it. But I'm also really curious about what they're doing with this wide receiver position. They're in on Lazard, and they're looking at trading Sutton and Judy. So I'll go solid. They've done a lot of work, so I'll put them just ahead of the Bengals. But I don't know. I like the Jermaine Pratt signing, so I'll put them just behind that. It's not that, I don't know, I can go back and forth on this all day. They're about the same. But there's some things there with the Broncos I'm a little curious about. The Bengals just have a different offseason and have got to pay Joe Burrow. They've got to pay Jamar Chase Higgins. So they're building their roster with that kind of in the forefront, while the Broncos have already paid Russell Wilson. They've already given up 3 first-round picks, 3 seconds, and 3 players for their head coach and quarterback. So they're just looking to get those final touches, while the Bengals are looking to build around that young core for years to come. So it's just a little bit of a different situation from one team to the next. But, both have had solid off seasons, in my opinion. Let's move on now. Next up, the Detroit Lions. Like a lot of what they've done, too. Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley in the secondary gives you a solid floor. I still don't think corner's out of the question there in 6. To get a, potential top-flight CB1 shutdown dude that might not be available at 18, because there's no guarantee Jeff Okudah works. There's no guarantee Emmanuel Mosley stays healthy, and even if he does, it's on a 1-year contract. So, in another year's time, we might be talking about a secondary that doesn't have Okudah or Mosley. So it's Cam Sutton, and that's it. So I wouldn't hate them taking Gonzalez or someone like that at 6, future-proofing that position. And then if it does, like if Okudah does take a step forward and Mosley does stay healthy, it's a great problem to have. 4 corners on the roster. You can make that work. You can figure something out or trade one of those pieces. So I still don't think it's out of the question. Alex Anzalone, it's not a bad contract. Linebacker for a little more than 6 a year isn't terrible. And he is obviously familiar with Aaron Glenn. He's been a starter for the Lions, but felt like they were already looking for an upgrade. So bringing back the same guy, I don't know. John Kaminsky, solid, but I do think, again, we're trying to find him an upgrade there at 3 tech, so did you need to? What's interesting here is David Montgomery, and they bring in Graham Glass now, former Bronco, but David Montgomery, so when they signed him, I was like, oh, okay, well, Jamal Williams must be looking for, if Montgomery's, fetching 6 a year, then Williams must be looking for 8, 9, 10. And he ends up signing for 4 years, so I think I'd rather have Jamal Williams for 4 year versus David Montgomery for 6. Not a huge difference, but that's not to say I hate this move whatsoever. And maybe they want to partner up David Montgomery with like a Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs. I think DeAndre Swift very possibly could be on the trade market last year of his rookie contract. And hey, if the Chargers move on from Austin Eckler, I bet they're hitting up the Lions line to see if they can get DeAndre Swift and kind of have a similar player with a lot of the same skill set. So, I like a fair amount of what they've done. I can't put everybody in the solid tier, though. That's the problem here. Where do I want to put the Lions? Let's go top of mid. I know it's probably going to rub a lot of Lions fans the wrong way. I like the corner move. Sorry, I can't do it. I like it more than what the Browns have done, so maybe I'll do something like this. Yeah, let's roll with this. This is fine. I do like the Dalvin Tomlinson signing, but I can go back and forth. I can deliberate in any which way, so for the sake of the video, we'll just kind of stick with that for right now. Packers, this is probably going to be one of the lower ones. Tre'Davious Moore, Tyler Davis, yeah, guys that not a whole lot of us know. And the real thing here is, like, you're moving on from Aaron Rodgers. So let's go below average right now. They're going to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Sorry, my camera was just moving there. But they're going to move on from Aaron Rodgers, get some capital back, which is good. And then that's going to set up the draft to be when this team can take this below average free agency grade and bump it up to maybe solid once we get to the offseason grades and that portion of the offseason and that time of year when it comes to creating content. So Then we get to the Houston Texans. They've been fairly active as well. Robert Woods, don't hate that. Can he play on the outside? Because I'm really interested to see what John Mechie III is all about in the slot. So I'm hoping this is a signing with thinking about him playing on the outside. MJ Stewart, actually, I'm friends with somebody who went to high school with MJ Stewart, so potential bias here. But yeah, 2 years, max value of 7.5. Can't go wrong there with additional secondary depth. Chase Winovich has always been a guy that I liked coming out of Michigan and just really hasn't taken that a huge step forward. Mike Boone paired up with Dameon Pierce. I like Mike Boone a ton too. Just hasn't really found a consistent role in a committee, but maybe this is the year. And I like him more than Rex Burkhead and some of the guys that were playing heavily last year. Hassan Ridgeway, young player, feels like he's got some potential. Jimmy Ward, familiarity with D'Amico Ryans, obviously. I thought more of these guys would come over and play in Houston too, like Charles Omenihu or maybe it seems to Ibukam or Aziz Al-Shaair, something like that. But really, Jimmy Ward's kind of the only guy. I love the trade for Shaq Mason. It's only a 1-year thing, but they needed to upgrade on that interior offensive line as soon as they could get it. So I like bringing in a veteran, and hopefully this helps out Kenyon Green too, because his rookie year was it left a lot to be desired. Derek Rivers is solid. He's played for a lot of different teams. Sheldon Rankins, in theory, a good run defender, but, he's kind of touch and go. So, there's just no splash moves here, which, I mean, this team isn't looking to win a Super Bowl, like, next season. So, do they need one? Not really, but I don't know if they've really moved the needle for me. So, I'll put them ahead of the Packers, but I feel like it's kind of below average. Like, Jimmy Ward, that's kind of the one signing where I'm like, yeah, I can see an immediate upgrade there, but I just don't know what else they've done to really change their complexion right now. But, they should go through the draft anyway, so we'll see once we get to that point. Let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts now. EJ Speed, we can kind of start there. They move on from Bobby Okereke, but getting EJ Speed back, I think, is solid to be the guy to replace Okereke, and it also works to pair him up with, Shaq Leonard, the artist formerly known as Darius Leonard. So Matt Gay, I mean, I don't like shelling out the money for Matt Gay because he's inconsistent in his own right, but he does have a boot. Put him in a dome. That could be good. Samson Ibukam is actually one of my favorite signings of the offseason, and I think 3 years, max $9 million a year, great value for a guy that kind of found a spot where he kind of figured out his role. He's going from 1-4-3 base to another 4-3 base, so that fit makes a lot of sense. And then the Gardner Minshew signing, also Taven Bryan, whatever. We'll see what it becomes, right? Like former first rounder, maybe there's some potential there. Looking for reinforcements on the defensive line. Maybe it worked out, probably won't. But Gardner Minshew to me kind of signals that they like Anthony Richardson, and maybe it'll be Minshew, who's obviously familiar with Shane Steichen, starting for a year and then giving way to Anthony Richardson thereafter. So yeah, all things considered, solid offseason for the Colts. Man, I don't know if I can put them in the solid tier. Looking at this one more time, I just got to deliberate. And you trade Stephon Gilmore, you only get a 5th rounder back. I don't really love that. So I'm going to put them maybe right here, right in the mid-tier. I love that Ibukam signing, but really other than that, I don't know if they've really changed a whole lot. Speed's basically just going to be a replacement for Okereke, and then you didn't get a whole lot back for Gilmore, so that's a little disappointing. And you got Gardner Minshew, who's a legend, so, hard to hate on that. Jags, so they move on from Shaq Griffin, then they franchise tag Evan Ingram, re-sign Roy Robertson-Harris, all solid players. Andrew Wingard, I guess fine, safety depth, and CJ Beathard, fine, quarterback depth. Yeah, I mean, it's just like a so-so offseason. They were in the red coming into this offseason anyways, so there wasn't a whole lot that I expected the Jags to be able to do. So with that context, we'll put them in the mid. We'll just kind of put them right here with the Cardinals. I don't think they've done a whole lot to change their identity. I do like bringing back Evan Ingram, however, so that is definitely nice. So next up is the Kansas City Chiefs. Releasing Frank Clark felt like 4 years in the making. Jawan Taylor, I'm really interested to see how this plays out. Guy who's pretty much been a lifelong, career-long right tackle, now having to flip over to the left side. And for a contract that 4 years, $80 million, like Orlando Brown probably signs that in a heartbeat, right? So what do they see in Taylor that they didn't see in Brown? Interesting. And Taylor is one of those guys that the league loves him, and his upside is a pass blocker. And for a team that passes it as much, maybe more than any other team in the league, does feel like a fit. And then I love that Charles Omenihu signing. Both these 49ers, ends going to different squads. And again, Chiefs will, 4-3 base, but you're playing nickel more often than not, so makes sense to put him out on the edge, have him be in a rotation with Karlaftis. Still would love to see them add a speed rusher, because I don't think Omenihu's that. So if you added a Will McDonald, let's just say, at 31, would love that, or 32 if you're going to count the Chargers pick for that matter. But nonetheless, last pick of the first round, if you were to add someone like a Will McDonald, or a Derek Hall if you really like him that much, or if you look at Ndike Ozama, one of those guys in a rotation with Omenihu and Karlaftis, that's a really scary pass rush. Drew Tranquill, I like the buy low here. Good athlete, and I'm biased here, obviously a Notre Dame fan, but I think he's been a solid player and been one of the better linebackers I've seen the Chargers have over the last couple of years. And then Mike Edwards, same thing. 1 year, $3 million. This guy was a really key component to that team winning a Super Bowl. Not like the reason they won it. He's not Tom Brady, but I mean, that was a good roster from head to toe, and it's also cool to see him go to the Chiefs, the team that the Bucks beat in that Super Bowl. So yeah, I think this is a solid offseason. This all kind of is hinged upon what Jawan Taylor looks like at tackle. But I'm gonna say it's a solid offseason. Yeah, we'll put him just ahead of the Bills. I think that's a good place for him. But you can put him really anywhere here on the solid tier. I'm not going to complain about it. You can make an argument based off how you feel about Jawan Taylor, basically, and that will dictate how high or how low they should go. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders. Amir Abdullah re-signing. I mean, this guy is just going to continue to linger around the league on basically a contract like this every single offseason, tagging Josh Jacobs, so that's a nice 1-2 punch. Abdullah is a good pass catcher, just like Jacobs. Signing Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm not really in love with that contract. Felt like they kind of panicked. Once they knew they weren't going to get Rodgers, they were just like, okay, what's the next thing we can do? What's the next thing we can do? And I'd almost just rather they move up in the draft to get a quarterback, or if they feel like they can get a guy at 7, stick and pick. You could even just trade places with Seattle at 5 and basically ensure yourself that you're going to get one of those, but moving up to 3 also wouldn't be bad. But I think once you sign Jimmy Garoppolo, that kind of moves off the table. $34 million guaranteed. Feels to me like he's a 1-year starter, and then you can restructure that contract and make him into a solid paid backup next year, or depending on who that young quarterback is that they bring in, he could be a 2-year starter, or if they don't get any of the quarterbacks, like imagine a world where the Titans move up from 11 to 3 or something like that. That's actually kind of fun. I might have to use that in my future mocks. But what if all 4 of the top 4 quarterbacks are gone? Like, what are the Raiders going to do then? I mean, that's why you get Jimmy Garoppolo, I guess, to be that little stopgap, and then maybe reassess the QB market the next offseason. Also, like Marcus Epps as a signing. Pairing up with Trevon Merrick, who can play really any spot you need a safety to. Nichols, strong, free. He did a lot of that at TCU, moving around, so don't hate that whatsoever. Brandon Facyon's whatever. Jacoby Myers, solid signing. I guess they're going to move on from Hunter Renfrow. They also had the trade for, pick 100 in exchange for Darren Waller. If you're going to compete in the AFC West, losing Darren Waller does not help you accomplish that, so I don't really love that trade for the Raiders, but they've been looking to move on from him, so to finally get that closure, probably not a bad idea. And then Brandon Parker, don't hate that. 1 year, $1.5 million for a swing tackle, solid depth, not bad whatsoever. Robert Spillane's a good linebacker when it comes to athleticism. He's had some moments, and he can be a thumper. I remember him taking Derrick Henry on 101, and it's actually kind of a stalemate, which is interesting. So for a team that's desperately looking for a linebacker year in and year out, don't hate that signing whatsoever. Dorsett, always can take a flyer on speed. And I actually really like the Jermaine Illuminor re-signing, because the way he played the back half last year, I don't feel uncomfortable with him starting at right tackle this year, or moving inside to guard if you feel like Brandon Parker can start at tackle. But they've also given Brandon Parker his fair shot to be a starting tackle, and it just has not worked out. So yeah, a lot of moves to talk about there when it comes to the Raiders. But nevertheless, not a bad offseason. Man, it's just nothing that really steals headlines right here. Myers was kind of the first wide receiver domino to fall, but I also don't really love that Jimmy Garoppolo contract. I'm going to go below average. Maybe a little bit better than the Texans, but I don't really love everything that the Raiders have done, but I could be wrong. And we'll see. And, if we get to a spot where all 4 of the top quarterbacks are off the board, I'll probably reassess my opinion on that Jimmy Garoppolo contract. Chargers, then the Rams. We can kind of do this 2 for 1. Neither one of them have done a whole lot. I do like the Eric Kendrick signings for the Chargers, which will probably put this in a solid, not in the solid tier, but at least be middle of the pack. Trey Pipkins, I just feel like he can do better there, so paying him $7+ a year, I'm not really in love with that. Morgan Fox has actually been a sneaky productive guy and a solid pass rusher. You could play at that 3-4 DN spot. Then on the other side, the Rams, they released Leonard Floyd, they lost Greg Gaines, and then they traded Jalen Ramsey for 3rd-round pick and Hunter Long. So yeah, the Rams have had a pretty rough offseason. So yeah, man, where do I want to put the Chargers? That's a great question. The Chargers, I'll put them maybe top of the mid. I do like that Kendrick signing good bit, and Morgan Fox. Let's go bottom of solid. We'll go bottom solid for the Chargers. And then this has been a bad offseason for the Rams. This has been a bad offseason for the Rams. They also lose Bobby Wagner, which to me that wasn't like the signal that they're going to go full rebuild, but they're really only rebuilding the defense, in addition then to Allen Robinson being on the trade market. They're not really reworking that offense, which is also problematic because that offensive line needs help like yesterday. So, yeah, kind of a head scratcher there for LA, the Rams, that is. Dolphins, so they get Jalen Ramsey, big time win there. Him and Xavier Howard in that Vic Fangio scheme. Oh my gosh, that could be crazy. Mike White, I think it's a great backup option. Honestly, $8 million a year, too, solid price tag, and if Tua battles some injuries, I love that. David Long is probably my favorite signing of this team, and what they did there, love that addition in him, plus Jerome Baker. That's a ton of speed in the middle of that defense. Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson back, both obviously connected to Mike McDaniels back in their San Francisco days. Good fits for that blocking scheme, and both productive in different games last season. Braxton Berrios, don't hate that. They did sign Cedric Wilson last year, so they already have that slot role, but if Harris is super cheap on a 1-year deal. Don't hate that flyer at all. Deshaun Elliott, cheap, third safety minimum. Don't hate that signing whatsoever. So yeah, I think a really good offseason for the Miami Dolphins. So how high do I want to put them in this? Hold on, I'm looking at it one more time. Yeah, like getting the running backs back. Ramsey, love that David Long signing. I mean, dare I say, an elite offseason. Dare I say, third rounder for Jalen Ramsey and Hunter Long? I don't know. Maybe I'll get some flack for that, but yeah, I really like a lot of the moves that the Dolphins have made this offseason. Next up, the Minnesota Vikings. So obviously releasing Kendricks, Dantzler, Thielen. Those are going to be some interesting spots to try to replace. Josh Oliver, mostly a blocking specialist tight end. Interesting 1-year deal for Marcus Davenport, so I am assuming they are going to move on from Zadarius Smith. It feels like moving on from one guy to the next. Smith's been really productive throughout his career. Yeah, he's had some injuries, but Davenport's, been banged up at times, but also had stints where he wasn't that productive, so... And also hasn't played more than like 550 snaps in a year in his career. So Zadarius Smith, I know he can handle that type of workload. Davenport, that leaves some to be desired. Bones back. Bradbury back. I actually don't hate the price tag. They got Bradbury back at, considering he's coming off a career year. Greg Joseph was solid for him last year. They finally figured that out. Byron Murphy's the interesting one here, because he is typically a zone specialist type of corner, but he does have the body type to potentially be a man press guy. So is that what Flores is looking for here? Does he think Byron Murphy can be that guy? Or is this the Vikings saying, hey, we need a corner. Byron Murphy's one of the better corners in free agency. We'll just add him and Brian Flores will figure it out. If that's the case, if it's the latter, I don't really love this as much, but 2 years, $22 million. Wish you could have gotten it longer term, but he's like 25 right now, that or 24. So he's trying to hit the market one more time before he hits like 27, 28, 29. And, then you start getting a conversation of how much you want to pay a guy at that age. So smart negotiating on his side. And, in the meantime, Vikings needed any cornerback help they can get. Also, like them bringing back Alexander Madison. So definitely some head scratchers in there. And it's not necessarily the perfect offseason. So Minnesota... put you top of the mid. I'll put you at the top of the mid. Yeah, there's things I like in there, but I look at that and I don't know if they got better. So that's kind of disappointing there for Minnesota, and a team I think that, especially with Rodgers leaving, they could win the NFC North. So wish they could have done more, but it is what it is. Patriots are the next team we're going to talk about here. Re-signed some additional guard depth. They released Jake Bailey, which is interesting. I feel like I know some Patriots fans that have been waiting for that to happen for a few years. Jonathan Jones, think bringing him back, $10 million a year, maybe a little rich, but he's been a good solid corner, and I think he can play both man, given his speed and over the top, that type of burst, but also fits well in the zone. That's what they've been running lately. Riley Reif, that's a solid, capable starting tackle if he stays healthy for $5 million. That's a great signing. And he's both played left tackle and over the last few years right tackle. Obviously coming off the injury, but I love teams buying low on a guy who had an injury. And really, has Reef ever missed a lot of other significant time because of injuries? I can't think of it. Maybe I'm just forgetting him. Re-signing Jabril Peppers. Juju Smith-Schuster to be that Jacoby Myers replacement. Pretty sure Myers got this exact same contract. Maybe it was 3 for $39. So a $6 million difference over 3 years. I'd rather have Jacoby Myers. And I say that as, a Juju Smith-Schuster. Literally, the round 3 video, I had a Juju Smith-Schuster t-shirt on. So, it feels like I'd just rather have had Myers. But nevertheless, you can control what you can control. James Robinson. I'm interested to see him out of that committee. In addition to guys like Damian Harris, who is a free agent. But then also Ramondre Stevenson. That could be really fun. James Robinson feels like a good guy to kind of buy low on because we've seen some high-level play from him. Gesicki's interesting because Bill Belichick loves those inline tight ends, and he wants a guy who can block, and that's why Gesicki was kind of the odd man out in Miami. So what are they thinking about using with Mike Gesicki? I'm really interested to see. I like some of those moves, Reef and Jones for sure. Juju's fine, I guess, but... yeah, all things considered, I really don't think this was an insane offseason. And again, just like I said about some of the other teams, I just don't think it really moved the needle that much. So I'm going to put them somewhere here in the mid. Put them right here between the Ravens and the Jags. Again, it could be anywhere on that mid tier. It just wasn't as great as I was hoping that they would have. Now, granted, they did have a lot of cap space, but not a great wide receiver free agency. So their number one need in my eyes, they couldn't do a whole lot with. So you play with the cards you dealt, right? Derek Carr going to the Saints. Only $60 million guaranteed, so this could easily just be 4 years, 50. We're talking about maybe 2 years of that being guaranteed, essentially. Don't hate that whatsoever. Juwan Johnson, I know a lot of Saints fans are excited about him and his potential, so I'm listening. And then additional re-signings there, edge, trying to get some reinforcements, spot where I think they can get better, as well as safety. Get Winston back on a cheap backup contract. Somehow they've worked out. Michael Thomas coming back at $10 million with a ton of incentives, so it's a win for Thomas because if he stays healthy and is Michael Thomas of 3 years ago, he's gonna make a lot of money in incentives, and that's great for the Saints because then they have their legit number one alpha wide receiver on top of Chris Olave and some other pieces. But for the Saints, it also allows them to get more cap flexibility. Calvin Sanders, Saunders rather, he's fine. Solid enough, I guess, run stopper, but nothing really to write home about. Nathan Shepard and Jamal Williams, again, I think that's a great value. $4 million a year, and this is a team that's looking at Alvin Kamara potentially being suspended, but also Kamara's contract over the next 2 years is very cuttable. So, do they add another running back? Like, could they add Devon Achane in the mix and have, a year of Kamara, Williams, and Achane, and then in a year or two's time, it's Williams and Achane's show? I can see that playing out. So, not a bad offseason whatsoever for the Saints, and they needed a quarterback. And Derek Carr, regardless of how you feel about him, he's a middle-tier quarterback, but he is one of the better guys on the market. So, I'm going to put him top of the mid. I didn't love anything else that they did, and if they didn't have Derek Carr, they'd probably be in below average. So, yeah, mid feels fair in my estimation for New Orleans. All right, let's move on now. Next team we're going to talk about are the Giants, then the Jets. So the Giants, I'm not really crazy about the Daniel Jones contract. Yeah, you free up some cap space this year, which is nice. Saquon Barkley, I like them tagging him, but I understood where Daniel Jones was probably the better tag, and you let Saquon walk and then try to get Jamal Williams for $4 million a year, or one of these other running backs, David Montgomery, Damian Harris, something like that. So I think there's a different way they could have played this, but they won a playoff game last year, so they were going to try to keep a lot of those pieces intact. Don't love the Jones contract, but also I think $80 million of it's guaranteed. Don't quote me on that because I don't have the exact number in front of me, obviously. But if $80 million of it is guaranteed, you're basically going what you would have done with a franchise tag plus one more year. So it's not super egregious. And then Saquon, one more year. You don't want him to turn into that Zeke contract. So I kind of like that tag right there for the Giants. Then let him walk next offseason, or that's at least what I think I would do. Sterling Shepard, that's a great buy low contract. Still has a ton of potential and a great downfield weapon, but also solid route runner in the intermediate parts of the field. So love them bringing him in. Jared Davis, solid player, always been a good athlete, just hasn't really figured out the rest of it. Sign a punter, sign a long snapper, yada, yada, yada. Some interior defensive line, nothing crazy here. Matt Breida, not a bad signing. He's been okay for them. It's a backup. Bobby Okereke, I am fascinated to see how that fits in with Wink Martindale's defense. He likes his blitzing linebackers, and I don't know if really that's Okereke. The big win here is releasing Kenny Golladay. No, I'm just kidding. It's the trade for Darren Waller for pick 100. That's a great buy low price. And if Waller can't stay healthy, then okay, pick 100 probably wasn't changing the needle. Never say never, but probably wasn't going to do anything that changed everything about that team's identity. But at the same time, if Darren Waller stays healthy, that changes a lot about that team's offense and their identity. And also, Daniel Jones targets the middle of the field a ton. And Darren Waller, that's where he makes his money. So it does feel like a perfect pairing for a pass catcher and a quarterback in that offense. Paris Campbell's also a solid player when he's healthy. He's just almost never healthy. But if he does stay healthy, then he's a good player. So him, you also get back Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard. A lot of those same pieces are in the mix. But I think the difference being Mike Kafka and Brian Dable. I just don't think Joe Judge and various offensive coordinators in that tenure were able to maximize those guys. Now I think there's a more competent staff and a crew that can make the most of those three. So I'm glad they brought a lot of those guys back, plus brought in Paris Campbell and Darren Waller. So, where do I want to put the Giants? I don't think it was a bad offseason. Man, I'm really just kind of bummed out by that Daniel Jones contract. I think they could have done better, but also you have to play the quarterback market, so it's not bad. Now I'll put them at the top of the mid. Saquon back, Darren Waller's a good signing. You could put him here bottom of good or bottom of solid, but I'm going to put him at the top of the mid because I do like the Waller move. Barkley for just one more year isn't bad whatsoever. And then they added some interesting pieces there at wide receiver / re-signed a lot of interesting pieces at wide receiver. Jets re-signed Quincy Williams. Is this maybe in tandem with Quinnen Williams? I would hope so. But also speedy linebacker who's a coverage specialist in his mid-20s, $6 million a year. Like that contract. Chuck Clark, especially considering we know either the first or the second rounder this year is going to go to Green Bay right now. Initially I had assumed it would be this year's second, next year's first, but it's starting to feel like it's going to be this year's first and maybe nothing else for Rodgers. And in that case, the things I've been mocking the Jets throughout the offseason have been offensive tackle, safety, and linebacker. And if you give up your first, you're then looking at the second round to try to draft a tackle to pair up with Becton long term. So therefore, that's been a spot where I've gone safety a ton at 43. So adding a Chuck Clark, who's a solid, capable starter for a 7th round pick, allows you to address that need while losing one of your top 100 picks. So I love that. And it addresses something that they need, but they also recognize that they're going to lose one of those assets that they could have used to draft safety. So I like that move a fair amount. Zero-line, yeah, it's fine. $3.5 million, it's not too bad. Alan Lazard, I'm interested by that. As a big body slot, you're going to also move on from Corey Davis, and this basically becomes net even year one because Lazard's going to make $11 million, and then by cutting Corey Davis, you save like 9.6, 9.7. So it's basically neutral that first year. And then after that, he's a great fit for that offense, great run blocker. Play him in the slot. You have Garrett Wilson outside, and we'll see, maybe Odell Beckham Jr. I don't know. I think Elijah Moore was, I liked him at Ole Miss as a guy who could play outside and in. So I think if Lazard moves into the slot, I don't think that alienates Elijah Moore. They could also end up trading him. Who knows? Solomon Thomas, like him, coming back on a one-year deal, former, top 5 pick. Maybe there's some potential to tap into. Weiss Schweitzer, solid player there in the interior, solid depth, and could be a capable starter for them. And then Thomas Morstead there at punter, and some other additional depth. So yeah, not a bad offseason. They just kind of patched up the holes they need. And I am going to go ahead and account that Aaron Rodgers is in this offseason haul, because at this point he's already said as much. So I'm gonna put him at the top of solid. Getting that quarterback was, forget about that. We're gonna go to elite, because I go back to my fix the franchise video, and I said this all in kind of one take, where they signed Jimmy Garoppolo, they can make the playoffs. If they sign Derek Carr, they can win a playoff game. If they sign Aaron Rodgers, they could be playing in the AFC Championship game, maybe even in the Super Bowl. So I think that move changes the entire complexion. It's kind of like the Broncos of last year, which I know that's going to scare a lot of Jets fans, and I say this as someone who's not a Jets fan, obviously, but wouldn't it be kind of funny, wouldn't it be a little funny if Rodgers did have like a Russell Wilson year and the Jets still managed to miss the playoffs? That's obviously, I can hear, millions of voices crying out in terror all at once, quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the Jets fans are probably typing away in the comments right now. I don't necessarily hope that, but it would be kind of funny. But nonetheless, you got the best quarterback on the market, so yeah, I'm going to put you in the elite tier, because I think you deserve it with landing a guy like Rodgers, and if it only costs you one first, think about what it would have cost 2 and 3 off seasons ago. Not a bad price tag. Hopefully they can get him for 2 years, because then I'd feel even better about that grade. Eagles, Brandon Graham re-signing, solid. Keep a guy that's obviously familiar, been a long time starter there. Don't hate that. Same thing with Fletcher Cox, as well as Jason Kelsey, who is not on here, but they did re-sign him. So like bringing back a lot of those pieces. Cox and Kelsey, I don't think are bad price tags. I know some people were like, hey, what are you gonna do with Cam Jurgens then? But I don't think it's bad for Jurgens to get another year of experience learning from Kelsey. I really don't think that, changes a whole lot. I love the Greedy Williams signing. And they already, and on top of that, like at this point, I feel pretty comfortable with that cornerback room, because I liked Williams a ton coming out of LSU. And then you pair him up with Zach McPherson, who I know a lot of Philadelphia fans like. I know that organization likes. You got back Bradbury, you got back Slay. And I think Williams is that third boundary corner. I love that a ton. And then hopefully you get back CJ Gardner-Johnson to play that nickel role that he was great in. But you also have Avonte Maddox, who was awesome in the slot too. So, and Gardner-Johnson, because of that, gives you that strong safety flexibility as well. Marcus Mariota is also a fantastic backup for Jalen Hurts. I mean, very similar and compatible skill sets. Re-signed Boston Scott, re-signed James Bradbury, Rashad Penny. I mean, this guy's averaging like 5+ yards per carry when he's actually healthy, and put him behind that O-line, he could be really, really scary. So I like a lot of what the Eagles did. Now, it's always tough, because it's like, how much should you re-sign your own guys for? But man, I really do think this was a very, very solid offseason. So you could alternate them and the Cowboys. I love the Cowboys getting Gilmore and Cooks for cheap, but man, the Eagles just kind of ran it back. And then that Greedy Williams signing, man, I think that's going to be a sneaky one. If Darius Slay or James Bradbury, God forbid, get hurt, I would not be surprised if Greedy Williams makes a name for himself this year. Not at all. Then we get to the Steelers. Releasing William Jackson saved a ton of cap space. They don't have the Isaac Seumalo move, but that is the headline signing. And they actually got him for 3 years, $24 million, which is the exact same contract they got James Daniels for, which I loved. And I am a Steelers fan, so just so in case you don't know that, but I'm a little biased here. But I think those are great price tags for both those guys. So I'm interested to see how that rest of the interior offensive line shakes out, because you used a third rounder a couple years ago on Kendrick Green, mid-round pick on Kevin Dotson, who's been kind of disappointing of late. But right now I'm kind of thinking it might be Seumalo at left guard, maybe James Daniels at center, and then at right guard it becomes a battle between Green and Dotson, or Nate Herbig, who they also signed this offseason, which you see there, 2 years, $8 million. And dude, apparently our new assistant GM used to work with the Eagles. His name's escaped me at the moment, but he views Herbig as a starter. And if that's the case, then I think right guard is probably Herbig's spot. But it could also be something where it's Daniels at right guard, Mason Cole, who they signed last offseason, at center, and then Seumalo at left guard. Seumalo is basically the one contingent I am pretty confident on where he's going to fit into the mix. So I think that signing's really, really solid. Patrick Peterson does not fix that cornerback problem, but that's, beside the point. I do think they're in a position to draft a guy at 17, and then maybe draft an offensive tackle at 32. I would love to see that happen. That would be my ideal draft path for the Steelers with their first 2 picks. Devontae KZ, solid depth, and no word yet on Terrell Edmonds, so we'll have to wait and see if they bring him back as well. And then Larry Ogunjobi, yeah, kind of an expensive contract, $10 million a year, but he was okay last year. He's getting old, so health is going to be kind of a concern, and also like how long until he hits a wall. I do really like that Cole Holcomb sign. And then he also signed a Layden Roberts, which is not on here for whatever reason. But pairing him up with Roberts is interesting because one's super twitchy, good athlete that covers the field. And then Roberts is your old school thumper that plays basically straightforward. And could they add one more guy? Like my last mock, I had Drew Sanders go to Pittsburgh. And I'm like, he could just be the third edge rusher because he played edge at Alabama, but also you could get kind of creative. Pittsburgh's known for liking blitzing their inside linebackers, so Sanders feels like a fit there. And if he's the third guy rotating in with Roberts and Holcomb, and Roberts, by the way, like pretty old guy, so relatively old, that is, for an NFL player, of course. So could that rotation work out? I think it could. But anyways, Pittsburgh, I really like this Sayamalu signing. I'm going to put him somewhere here in the mid. They were not a team that I expected a whole lot from. Oh man, I grabbed the Rams on accident. Whoops. We'll put them behind the Ravens. We'll put them in front of the Ravens. Yeah, we'll put them in front of the Ravens. So the same model signing I really do like. So happy as a Steelers fan so far. And then hopefully again we get corner at 17 and an offensive tackle at 32. That would be my dreams coming true. San Francisco, bring back Deshaun Gibson. Don't hate that whatsoever. The Javon Hargrave signings, obviously the big name ticket here. And then Kevin Givens, solid depth. Sam Darnold. I'm interested to see when Brock Purdy and Trey Lance get hurt, how Kyle Shanahan resurrects the career of Sam Darnold. And he goes from signing this 1 year, $4.5 million deal to like 3 years, annual average salary at like 24 or something like that next year, just because Kyle Shanahan's going to work his magic. So actually, no disrespect to Sam Darnold. Hope we don't see him next year because I'm just interested by Lance and Purdy in that battle. But Darnold, low cost, and man, him and Shanahan, that if there's a guy to make it work, it's going to be Kyle Shanahan. Clelin Ferrell, kind of a same note. I'm ready for him to have that Charles Omenihu career arc. Omenihu, I think we look at Farrell as a bust because he was drafted top 4. Omenihu was a very disappointing player, despite not being, he wasn't drafted as high as Farrell, but he was disappointing. Goes to San Francisco, finds the role, perfect fit, and, now making, Omenihu is making, 9 a year? So, yeah, I could see Clelin Ferrell kind of that same trajectory because he's had games and he's been a good run defender at that point too. Now it just comes down to figuring out if he has more as a pass rusher. And if there's a place to figure it out, San Francisco is definitely one of those spots. You get Jake Brendel back as well at center. So, not a bad offseason by any stretch. We'll probably put him somewhere there in the mid-tier. Yeah, I think that's about their home right now. Obviously, they didn't have a whole lot of space to make a bunch of crazy splash heavy flashy moves, but I think they've done a lot of things to make that team better. And obviously now right tackle is a big time hole and something they're gonna have to address. Potentially draft, maybe like a Blake Freeland. He feels like a logical replacement for Mike McGlinchey. All right, next up, Seattle Seahawks. And they obviously re-signed Geno Smith. That's a big-time re-signing. He was really good for them last year. And enough guarantees to where it sounds like it's just for next calendar year, which is interesting. So is it a 1 year starting gig guarantee or is it 2 years? It could be somewhere there in between. It's either one of those two, really. Gabe Jackson released. Yeah, that kind of felt like a year or two in the making. Draymond Jones, really good pass rush specialist there in that 3-tech spot somewhere that could definitely get better. Jaron Reed, I don't think that changes a whole lot about this team. Max contract value of 5.4 a year. He's just a familiar piece that could bring some pass rush juice, but I think it's been a while since Jaron Reed's been a good player. No disrespect, but Drew Lock back, yeah, he's I guess he's fine as a backup. Devin Bush is the interesting buy low kind of guy here, and no word yet on the contract values you can see. But man, if they figure out his potential, him and Jordan Brooks would be a really athletic tandem there in the middle, and you'd be getting an absolute bargain on Bush, former top 10 pick. And then Julian Love, really like that signing. Can play in the nickel, can play safety, and I'm kind of thinking on him playing the nickel right now, and then you'll keep Kobe Bryant out wide. So I was anticipating Seattle adding like a Shaq Griffin this offseason. Still don't rule it out, but by signing Love, I think they're just going to keep Kobe Bryant out wide, and Love's going to play the nickel. So yeah, not a bad offseason whatsoever for Seattle. Maybe not the most insane, maybe not the most flashy. They also lose Rashad Penny. We'll put him again in the mid-tier. Everyone's just kind of filing in here in the mid-tier. We'll put him just ahead of Pittsburgh. But again, the mid-tier, no exact ranking here. But anyways, let's move on. Only a handful of teams left to go. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they released Donovan Smith. That made a lot of sense, saved some money. They also trade Shaq Griffin. They then signed Greg Gaines, which is interesting because he's this nose tackle when you already have arguably the best nose tackle in football, at least from a run-stopping perspective, in Vita Vea. Released Cameron Bray. That felt like, a long time coming kind of as well. Now I want to see what Cade Otton's all about. They got an absolute steal for Levante David. It's a 1-year contract, but $7 million for one of the better linebackers in football. That's a bargain. Baker Mayfield's their bridge quarterback, and, he's going to win the battle with Kyle Trask. So Baker Mayfield's going to have a year to see if he's got what it takes to be a starting quarterback in this league. I know the Bucs were excited about him, so that's interesting. And then Jamel Dean, that's the best move in my opinion. Him and that David re-signing. So they'll at least get a competent grade because of those two guys coming back, and it allows you to keep some consistency and continuity there in the mix. Man, where do I want to put Tampa? I can't put them in below average, so I got to put them in mid as well from just behind the Steelers. Intrigued by Baker, but I really love the Jamel Dean's re-signing as well as Levante David, and that's what really kind of steals the show for me. All right, 2 teams to go. Tennessee Titans, they have to move on from both Bud Dupree, Ben Jones, as well as plenty of other players, Robert Woods, Taylor Lewan. They sign Andre Dillard. There have been talks about him playing tackle or guard, so don't think they're done addressing offensive line. They also lose David Long, which I think is a huge loss in the middle of that defense, and really for a very cheap price point, which is interesting. Arden Key, I do like that signing. Aziz Al-Shaair, like that. And if you're going to lose Long, Aziz Al-Shaair was one of the better options available, and it's up to $6 million. I wish they could have had him on a multi-year contract, but nonetheless, they addressed that position and found a guy who I think has some intriguing upside. Arden Key replaced Dupree. I still think they can draft a guy and have it be a 3-person rotation of Landry, Key, and then whoever that draft pick is. Daniel Brunskill, they add a guard considering they lost Nate Davis. So you lose a tackle in the one, you add another one, you lose a guard, and then you sign another one. So again, I still think there's work to be done. They obviously need a center. So yeah, not necessarily the craziest offseason. I do like the Al-Shaair signing and Arden Key as well. And Dillard, he could help, but even that, I don't know if it's a real big guarantee. I'm going to go below average for the Titans. Sorry, I know that's probably going to irritate a lot of Titans fans. You could probably put the Cardinals in this spot here too, something like that. But yeah, I just don't think the Titans really have done anything to make themselves a better football team, which is disappointing. Kind of swapping out offensive linemen, trading in edge rushers, and then trading in linebackers that no guarantee that they're better, but if there is a spot where I think they got better, I don't know. I like David Long a ton, so maybe Al-Shaair is better, but I don't know. That could, I don't know. I'm going back and forth on that. More I talk about it. Washington Commanders, cool. Re-signed David Mayo and Danny Johnson, who have been whatever, but Deron Payne is the big re-signing there. A lot of money for Payne. He kind of reset the interior defensive lineman market a little bit, so the rest of the NFL is kind of upset with Washington about that, I'm sure. Nick Gates, an interesting story and an interesting signing. Relatively cheap, don't hate it whatsoever. They're signing Andrew Wiley to be a starter, which I'm fascinated by. Moving Sam Cosmi then inside to play guard, I would assume. And then Gates probably at left guard, which, maybe he's better than Norwell. He's definitely younger, and he's also coming at a cheaper price point than Norwell last year, so don't hate it whatsoever. Brissett to be, the guy who backs up Sam Howell, I guess, or can't battle, and then if things go really bad really quick, Brissett can step in and be competent. So, yeah, nothing crazy here. Deron Payne bringing him back, I don't know. To me, he's kind of their 4th best defensive lineman. When Chase Young's healthy, I don't know if Payne is better than Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, or Chase Young. So, I don't know. That's a lot to pay your 4th best defensive lineman, but I understand it's a big part of their identity. Man, I don't know. I'm kind of deliberating on this one, buying myself some time. I kind of want to put them in below average, that or bottom of mid. Let's go bottom of mid. Let's go bottom mid. But I'll go ahead and keep it up here for a little bit longer. Everyone, that is my current week 1 of free agency tier ranking of each and every team's offseason so far, both with free agency as well as trades made so far. Let me hear it down below. I know there's a lot of takes in here that probably, piss off a lot of different fan bases and even people who aren't fans of that team. I probably have somebody way too low in your opinion. I probably have another team way too high. So let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. As long as you're not an asshole, I will respond to every comment. So let's talk some football down below. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button. And if you're new around here, want to see more football content, a lot of draft coverage still on the horizon as we get closer and closer to April 28th. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if that is something that interests you. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.